Beneath the blazing golden lights of a Beverly Hills mansion, Gabriel Thornton, real estate king, loses himself in the arms of his lover, Scarlett, while his pregnant wife, Eleanor, desperately calls out in the throes of labor. A blocked number, a cold laugh, and Eleanor's world crumbles. Can love rise from the ashes of betrayal? Or will the shadows of secrets consume everything? Dive into this gripping tale. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to catch more heart-pounding drama. Beneath the radiant sunset that gilded the winding roads of Beverly Hills, Gabriel Thornton's mansion stood resolute, a dream carved from marble. Its white walls caught the glow of towering crystal chandeliers, each prism twinkling like a star fallen from the heavens. Inside, 18 rooms unfurled like a labyrinth of opulence, a private theater draped in crimson velvet, a gym brimming with sleek machines, and a spa where the scent of sandalwood oil mingled with the gentle trickle of water. On the walls, Monet's paintings bloomed with fields of blurred blossoms, hanging beside Warhol's bold abstracts, as if weaving a silent tale of wealth without need for words. This was no mere house. It was a declaration of power, of triumph, of a man who had conquered all. Gabriel Thornton, at 38, bore a face chiseled as if from stone, with deep green eyes and a smile that could set an entire room ablaze. He was the embodiment of the American dream, a man who had risen from humble days to become the king of real estate in Los Angeles, as Forbes had crowned him. In just 12 years, he had forged an empire worth nearly $1 billion, transforming barren suburban lots into soaring downtown skyscrapers. At charity galas, Gabriel appeared in flawlessly tailored suits, shaking hands with tycoons and flashing a grin for the cameras. He donated millions to the Bright Futures Children's Education Fund, a prestigious non-profit, and the press never tired of lauding his generosity. To the outside world, Gabriel was the pinnacle of perfection, a man who held everything others coveted. Yet, beneath the dazzling sheen, shadows lurked. Within Gabriel's heart, a crack was quietly spreading, unseen even by himself. He had a wife, Eleanor Brooks, a woman of gentle beauty, with soft brown hair and eyes brimming with sincerity. Eleanor chose a life of quiet reserve, shunning the flashing lights and raucous parties Gabriel frequented. She cherished tranquil mornings, curled up by a window with a book, or tending to the small garden in their home. To many, Eleanor was an enigma, the wife behind the powerful man, rarely glimpsed in tabloids. Gabriel had once loved her deeply, captivated by her warmth and intellect, but time had dimmed that flame, leaving a void he didn't know how to fill. Into that void stepped Scarlett Vega, a gust of unfamiliar wind sweeping through Gabriel's life. Scarlett, with her glossy black hair and eyes sharp as frost, was more than a partner in real estate ventures. She was a master strategist, turning paper figures into multi-million-dollar deals. But beyond that, Scarlett was a wildfire, rekindling sensations in Gabriel he thought long buried. She brought exhilaration, the thrill of razor-sharp conversations, audacious plans, and stolen moments heavy with temptation. With Scarlett, Gabriel felt alive again, as if racing against his own youth, unshackled from the weighty duties of a husband. Within that lavish mansion, Gabriel often found himself teetering on a precipice. On one side was Eleanor, his wife with an open heart but growing ever distant. On the other was Scarlett, his lover with a daring smile, drawing him into a world where boundaries could be shattered. He knew he tread a perilous path, but Scarlett's allure was stronger than any warning in his mind. Each time he met her gaze, his pulse quickened, as though he were living a second life, one free of burdens, brimming with joy and power. Yet even in his most intoxicating moments, a vague unease wormed its way into Gabriel's soul. He sensed the fragility of the world he'd built, as if those marble walls could crumble at any moment. Eleanor, though reserved, was not blind to the subtle shifts in her husband's eyes. or the late nights he returned home with the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume. She hadn't confronted him, hadn't asked questions, but doubt had begun to take root in her heart, a tiny seed waiting to split open. All right, before you settle in, take a sec to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're genuinely vibing with what I'm putting out here. And drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a thrill to see who's joining us from all corners of the globe. Scarlett, meanwhile, knew her power. She understood how to make Gabriel lose himself in her, how to make him forget the vows of years past. But she also saw, deep in his gaze, a small corner still reserved for Eleanor, a corner she couldn't yet reach. That knowledge fueled her resolve, not just to keep Gabriel by her side, but to claim him entirely, wholly, and irrevocably. Beneath Beverly Hills' fiery sunset, as the day's final light danced across the marble walls, Gabriel stood by a window, gazing out at the meticulously tended garden. In that moment, he felt like a wanderer caught between two realms, one of stability, of enduring but faded love, the other of blazing passion, fraught with risk. He didn't know that, even then, fate was quietly weaving its threads, drawing him toward a storm he couldn't foresee. This story, like the paintings adorning Gabriel's mansion walls, was only beginning to sketch its first strokes. But each stroke carried a whisper, that even the brightest glory could conceal the darkest secrets, and that love, no matter how fierce, could be tested by the very choices we make. Beneath the pale golden light of an autumn morning in Los Angeles, the kitchen in Gabriel Thornton's mansion brimmed with the breath of extravagance. Sun rays pierced through vast glass windows, casting their glow upon the Zen-inspired garden outside, where white pebbles were meticulously arranged like delicate brushstrokes in a serene painting. Gabriel sat there, facing Scarlett Vega, a woman with raven black hair that shimmered, and a smile as sharp as a finely honed blade. They were discussing a new hotel project in the heart of the city, millions of dollars dancing in Scarlett's words, each sentence radiating confidence and allure. Yet, within Gabriel's heart, a void was slowly taking shape, like a faint crack marring the flawless marble wall of his life. 8 years of marriage to Eleanor Brooks had once been a tender symphony, each note resonating with gentleness and harmony. But time had dulled that melody. Eleanor, with her open heart and eyes ever brimming with hope, had devoted much of recent years to the grueling pursuit of fertility treatments. Endless medical appointments, vials of medicine stacked on shelves, and sleepless nights consumed by nameless anxieties had become the rhythm of her existence. Gabriel had been the one to hold her hand tightly in the early days, comforting her through each setback, but his patience had gradually eroded. The heavy burden of intense emotions, Eleanor's silent tears, and the pressure of unfulfilled hopes made him feel trapped in a room with no escape. He began searching for a place to breathe, a refuge free from the shadows of failure. Scarlett entered Gabriel's life like a fierce gust of wind, carrying with her a sense of freedom and excitement he had long forgotten. She was not merely a colleague in real estate ventures, but a flame, igniting every boundary he had set for himself. Conversations with Scarlett transcended mere numbers or blueprints. They were adventures, where she painted visions of lavish trips to Napa Valley or extravagant parties on yachts off the Malibu coast. In her eyes, Gabriel saw a reflection of a younger, freer version of himself, unburdened by responsibilities or vows. Scarlett made him feel alive, as if he were racing against time, desperately clinging to a youth that marriage had dimmed. That morning, as sunlight danced across the walnut dining table, Gabriel and Scarlett were engrossed in discussing the new hotel project. Scarlett's laughter rang out, crisp as crystal, slicing through the tranquil air. But then Gabriel's phone buzzed, shattering the rhythm of their exchange. Eleanor's name flashed on the screen, stark as a reminder of the world he was trying to sidestep. In that moment, Gabriel's heart gave a subtle pang, a flicker of unease creeping in. Eleanor rarely called at this hour unless something was urgent. He stared at the screen, his finger hesitating over the answer button. Scarlett raised an eyebrow, her gaze like a velvet hook, pulling him back to her. No words were spoken, just a look, but it was potent enough to make Gabriel press the reject button. The phone's ringing ceased, leaving a heavy, lingering silence. He tried to shake off the disquiet, but Scarlett's eyes, bold and captivating, held him firmly in her world. Miles away, in a modest Santa Monica apartment, Eleanor sat alone on the sofa, the light from the window illuminating her pale, weary face. In her hands was a test result, its words blurred through a veil of tears. After 3 years of battling setbacks, enduring physical pain, and grappling with soul-crushing despair, she had finally received joyous news. She was pregnant. Eleanor's heart pounded, a mix of overwhelming happiness and vague fear. She imagined sharing this moment with Gabriel, picturing his radiant smile, the way he used to look at her in the early days of their love. She called Clara Evans, her dearest friend, her voice trembling as she shared the miracle that had arrived. Clara's cheers over the phone were like a warm breeze, soothing Eleanor's heart. But when she dialed Gabriel's number, only a long, hollow tone answered, like a wall separating her from the man she had once trusted most. Eleanor remained there, her hand still clutching the phone, her heart constricting. She tried again, then again, but each unanswered tone was a dagger piercing her hope. The joy of the child soon to be born was now overshadowed by a growing tide of doubt. Where was Gabriel? Why didn't he answer? She thought of the times he came home late, the moments he avoided her gaze, the unfamiliar perfume lingering on his suit jacket. Pain seeped in, not loud, but razor sharp, like a slow cut across her skin. Eleanor tried to dismiss those thoughts, telling herself Gabriel was merely busy, that he was still the husband who loved her. But deep within, a faint voice whispered that she was losing him, bit by bit, to something, or someone, she couldn't see. In the light-filled Beverly Hills kitchen, Gabriel resumed his conversation with Scarlett, but his mind was no longer fully present. The unease from the missed call clung to him, a faint shadow trailing his thoughts. Scarlett, keen as a hunter, sensed the subtle shift in his eyes. She leaned forward, her hand lightly grazing his, her smile both tender and calculated. She needed no words, just a touch, a glance, to draw him back to her. And Gabriel, though his heart still ached for Eleanor, let himself be swept away, like a boat adrift in Scarlett's waves. Their story, like the Zen garden outside, was a carefully composed picture, but beneath its tranquil surface churned turbulent currents, poised to unravel everything. Eleanor, with her fragile joy in hand, and Gabriel, torn between two worlds, were unaware that fate was preparing to test them with lines sharper than any blade. Under the golden morning light streaming through the tall windows of Gabriel Thornton's Beverly Hills mansion, a gentle glow bathed the polished marble floors. In the hushed stillness of the dining room, Gabriel sat across from Scarlett Vega, her presence as magnetic as ever, her dark eyes shimmering with a knowing intensity. The air between them hummed with the lingering echoes of their earlier discussion about a lucrative hotel deal in downtown Los Angeles, but now a different kind of tension hung heavy. Gabriel's phone, resting on the sleek walnut table, lit up with Eleanor's name, a beacon from a world he was increasingly drifting away from. His heart gave a fleeting lurch, a faint whisper of the man he once was. But Scarlett's gaze held him like a tether, pulling him back into her orbit. He hesitated, his thumb hovering over the screen, then answered, his voice strained with forced warmth. Eleanor's voice came through, fragile yet trembling with a quiet intensity, carrying a weight that tightened Gabriel's chest. She was pregnant. The words struck him like a distant memory of a dream he had once clung to, now blurred by the haze of his new reality. For years, they had yearned for this moment, enduring countless doctor visits, tears, and silent hopes. But now, as the news settled into his mind, it felt more like a complication than a triumph. Across from him, Scarlett sipped her coffee, her lips curling into a faint, mocking smile, as if watching a predictable scene unfold in a play she had already seen. Her presence was a silent challenge, a reminder of the thrill and freedom she offered, a stark contrast to the heavy, unspoken burdens of his marriage. Gabriel managed a response, his words carefully measured, but they lacked the joy Eleanor had envisioned in her countless daydreams of this moment. She had pictured his voice breaking with excitement, his arms pulling her close, their shared relief washing away years of struggle. Instead, his tone was distant, like a stranger fulfilling an obligation. Eleanor pressed on, her voice soft but urgent, telling him about her appointment tomorrow with Dr. Sarah Coleman at Cedars-Sinai, a prestigious hospital where they had pinned so many hopes. She needed him there, not just physically, but as the partner she remembered, the one who had once held her hand through every disappointment. Gabriel promised he would come, but the words rang hollow, even to him, as Scarlett's gaze bore into him, her smile sharpening like a blade. When the call ended, the silence in the room was deafening. Scarlett leaned forward, her voice low and laced with a calculated sweetness that masked something colder. Her words were a subtle jab, planting a seed of doubt in Gabriel's already conflicted mind. She didn't need to say much. Her tone, her posture, the way her fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup, all of it spoke of a world where Eleanor's triumph was an inconvenience, a tether pulling Gabriel back to a life he was beginning to resent. He felt the weight of her words, a quiet accusation that stirred his unease. The news of Eleanor's pregnancy, which should have been a beacon of light, instead cast shadows over the reckless freedom he had found with Scarlett. He was torn, caught between the man he wanted to be and the man he was becoming. That evening, Gabriel drove back to their Santa Monica apartment, a bouquet of hydrangeas cradled in the passenger seat and a pearl necklace tucked in his pocket. The gifts were a gesture, an attempt to bridge the growing chasm between him and Eleanor, but they felt more like an apology for sins he wasn't ready to confess. When he stepped through the door, Eleanor was there, her face softened by the glow of a lamp, but her eyes carried a quiet wariness. She smiled at the flowers, her fingers brushing the petals, but the gesture didn't reach her heart. She could sense the distance in him, the way his shoulders tensed, the way his gaze flickered away from hers. The necklace, delicate and expensive, lay heavy in her hands, a beautiful thing that felt like a substitute for something she couldn't name. They sat together, exchanging quiet words about the baby, but the air between them was thick with unspoken questions. Eleanor wondered if the man she loved was still there, buried beneath the polished exterior of the stranger before her. For Eleanor, the day had been a whirlwind of emotions. The moment she saw the positive test result, her heart had soared, a fragile hope blooming after years of heartbreak. She had imagined this moment so many times, Gabriel's arms around her, their laughter filling the room, a shared dream finally coming to life. But his absence during her call, the coldness in his voice, had cracked that vision. She sat alone after he left, the apartment silent except for the hum of the refrigerator, her fingers tracing the edge of the test result. The joy of her pregnancy was now tinged with a creeping dread, a fear that the life she was building might not include the man she had built it for. She thought of the late nights, the unanswered texts, the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume on his clothes. Each memory was a thread in a tapestry of doubt, weaving a picture she wasn't ready to face. Gabriel, too, was wrestling with his own turmoil. As he drove back to Beverly Hills, the city lights blurring past, he felt the weight of Eleanor's news pressing against him. A child, a life they had fought for, was supposed to be a triumph, a new beginning. But instead, it felt like a chain, binding him to a life he was no longer sure he wanted. Scarlett's words echoed in his mind, her voice a siren's call, promising a world of freedom and conquest. Yet, beneath her allure, Gabriel sensed a danger, a pull toward a darkness he couldn't fully grasp. He wanted to be the husband Eleanor deserved, but the man he saw in the mirror was someone else, someone chasing a thrill that left him hollow. Their story, like the hydrangeas wilting slowly in the vase, was at a turning point. Eleanor's hope and Gabriel's conflict were two currents pulling in opposite directions, threatening to tear apart the fragile fabric of their marriage. The news of the pregnancy, meant to unite them, had instead deepened the rift, setting the stage for a storm neither could yet see. As night settled over Los Angeles, the city's glow masking the shadows within, their paths diverged further, leading toward a moment where choices would no longer be avoidable. Under the golden glow of autumn light fading over Los Angeles, a heavier burden settled upon Eleanor Thornton's advancing pregnancy. Each morning ushered in a fresh wave of nausea, an unrelenting tide that left her depleted, curled up on the luxurious velvet couch in the living room of their Santa Monica apartment. The space, once a haven of warmth with its soft cream walls and framed botanical prints, now felt like a cage, its silence amplifying her mounting unease. Dr. Sarah Coleman, her obstetrician at Cedars-Sinai, had been unequivocal. Stress was the enemy, a threat to both Eleanor and the fragile life growing within her. Yet, avoiding stress seemed an impossible feat, as Gabriel, her husband, grew ever more distant, his presence as fleeting as the morning mist over the Pacific. Gabriel's days were consumed by high-stakes negotiations, his evenings lost in dimly lit restaurants where he lingered with Scarlett Vega. The woman who had once been merely a sharp-minded colleague had become an integral part of his life, her allure a dangerous current pulling him away from the shores of his marriage. Eleanor felt his absence like a slow-bleeding wound, each late night an unanswered message carving a deeper scar. She lay on the couch, one hand resting on her swelling belly, her mind replaying moments when Gabriel's touch had been tender, his promises unwavering. Those memories now seemed like relics, artifacts of a love she wasn't certain still endured. The baby, her long-awaited miracle, should have been a bridge to draw them closer, but instead, it seemed to widen the chasm between them. Across town, in the sleek offices of downtown Los Angeles, or the candlelit corners of upscale bistros, Gabriel was ensnared in Scarlett's orbit. Her laughter, sharp and intoxicating, filled the spaces where Eleanor's quiet hopes once resided. Scarlett painted vivid pictures of a life unbound by domestic ties, a world of private jets to Aspen, late-night deals sealed over champagne, and a freedom that felt like oxygen to a man who believed he was suffocating. She didn't need to push hard. Her words were like whispers of wind, gentle yet persistent, eroding Gabriel's resolve. The notion of fatherhood, once a shared dream with Eleanor, now loomed in his mind as a burden, a chain threatening to anchor him to a life of routine and sacrifice. Scarlett's vision was seductive, a siren's call promising a horizon without limits, and Gabriel, though he felt the tug of guilt, let himself drift toward it. In the stillness of their apartment, Eleanor's closest friend, Clara Evans, became her anchor. Clara had seen the signs long before Eleanor was ready to acknowledge them. At charity galas and industry events, she had noticed Scarlett's too close proximity, the way her hand lingered on Gabriel's arm, the glances they exchanged that held more than professional courtesy. One afternoon, as sunlight poured through the apartment's arched windows, casting golden patterns on the hardwood floor, Clara sat beside Eleanor, her voice steady but laced with concern. She didn't need to pry. Eleanor's silence spoke volumes. With a trembling hand, Eleanor showed her the evidence she had uncovered: receipts for jewelry and designer dresses, purchases Gabriel had never mentioned, items that never reached her hands. Worse still were the text messages she had glimpsed on his phone. Scarlett's name followed by winking emojis and digital kisses that pierced Eleanor's heart like shards of glass. Clara's presence was a lifeline, but it couldn't erase the ache in Eleanor's chest. She felt like a ghost in her own life, chasing the shadow of the man she had married. Each morning, Gabriel left before dawn, his excuses about early meetings ringing empty. Each night, he returned long after midnight, his eyes avoiding hers, his words curt and detached. Eleanor clung to the belief that he was merely overwhelmed by work, that the man who had once held her through sleepless nights was still there. But the truth was a quiet storm brewing within her, its winds whispering of betrayal. She yearned to confront him, to demand answers, but fear held her back. Fear of what she might learn, fear of shattering the fragile hope she held for their unborn child. For Gabriel, the days blurred into a cycle of ambition and avoidance. Scarlett's influence was a tide, drawing him deeper into her world, where every success felt like a rebellion against the constraints of his marriage. She spoke of a future where they could conquer the world together, unencumbered by the demands of a family. Her words were a velvet trap, wrapping around Gabriel's doubts and desires, making the life he shared with Eleanor seem like a fading photograph. Yet, even as he leaned into Scarlett's promises, a part of him recoiled. Late at night, alone in his car, the city's neon lights reflecting off the windshield, he would think of Eleanor. The way her eyes softened when she spoke of their future, the way her hand rested protectively on her belly. Those thoughts were fleeting, drowned out by Scarlett's voice in his mind, but they left a residue of guilt he couldn't shake. Eleanor, meanwhile, felt herself unraveling. The joy of her pregnancy, once a radiant beacon, was now overshadowed by a growing sense of isolation. She spent hours staring out the window, watching the waves crash against the Santa Monica shore, wondering when she had become invisible to the man she loved. The receipts, the messages, the late nights, they were pieces of a puzzle she didn't want to solve, but couldn't ignore. Clara urged her to act, to demand the truth, but Eleanor's heart was a battlefield of love and fear. She wanted to believe in Gabriel, to trust that the life they had planned was still within reach. But each unanswered call, each empty promise, chipped away at that belief, leaving her to question whether she was fighting for a man who had already let her go. Their story, like the autumn leaves falling outside their apartment, was caught in a slow descent. Eleanor's quiet strength and Gabriel's wavering resolve were pulling them in opposite directions, each step widening the gulf between them. The baby, a symbol of hope, had become a silent wedge, amplifying the truths they were both too afraid to face. As the days grew shorter and the air turned crisp, the stage was set for a reckoning, one that would force them to confront the fragility of their bond and the choices that could either save or destroy it. The May afternoon in Malibu was draped in a soft golden haze, the kind that made the ocean shimmer like shattered glass. Eleanor Thornton stood on the balcony of a sprawling beachfront home, the clamor of a birthday party fading behind her. Laughter and the clink of glasses filled the air, but her body felt heavy, her mind reeling with a sudden, disorienting dizziness. Her hands gripped the railing, the cool metal anchoring her as she fumbled for her phone. The weight of her pregnancy bore down on her, a constant reminder of the life she carried within, but also of the growing void in her marriage. She needed Gabriel, not just as a husband, but as the anchor she had once trusted. Her fingers trembled as she dialed his number, each ring echoing her hope that he would answer, that he would prove her fears wrong. But the call went unanswered, the silence on the other end a cold blade piercing her heart. Across the city, in Scarlett Vega's luxurious penthouse, the air was thick with the scent of expensive wine and ambition. Gabriel sat on a plush velvet couch, a glass of Cabernet in hand, his senses dulled by the wine and Scarlett's intoxicating presence. The city lights glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows, a backdrop to their shared world of power and possibility. His phone buzzed on the glass coffee table, Eleanor's name flashing like a warning. For a moment, Gabriel's heart faltered, a flicker of guilt cutting through the haze. He knew her calls were rare these days, reserved for moments of urgency. But Scarlett, lounging across from him, caught sight of the name on the screen. Her lips curved into a sly, mocking smile, her eyes glinting with unspoken challenge. The weight of her gaze, sharp and unrelenting, pressed down on him, stirring a reckless defiance. He hesitated, his thumb hovering over the screen, then pressed the block button, severing the connection with a single touch. Scarlett's laughter rang out, bright and cruel, as she raised her glass to toast his newfound freedom. Gabriel forced a smile, but the act left a bitter taste, a quiet unease settling in his chest like ash. Back in Malibu, Eleanor's world tilted. The unanswered call drained the last of her strength. and she sank to the curb outside the beach house, her dress pooling around her like a fallen sail. Hot tears streaked down her cheeks, each one carrying a fragment of her shattered hope. She had imagined Gabriel's voice, warm and reassuring, promising to come for her. Instead, the silence was a betrayal she couldn't comprehend. Her hands cradled her belly, a protective gesture for the child who deserved a father present in their life. With no response from Gabriel, she called a taxi, the driver's concerned glance barely registering as she climbed in, her mind a storm of fear and confusion. She didn't know that the door to her husband had been slammed shut, that a single tap had cut her off from the man she still loved. A week later, Santa Monica's skies darkened, a storm rolling in with a fury that mirrored the chaos within Eleanor. Rain lashed against the apartment's windows, the sound like a relentless drumbeat as she stood in the nursery, folding tiny onesies with a tenderness that belied her exhaustion. The room, painted in soft pastels, was a sanctuary she had crafted for her unborn child, but tonight it felt like a fragile illusion. A sudden, searing pain tore through her abdomen, sharp enough to steal her breath. She gasped, clutching the edge of the crib, her vision blurring as panic surged. This wasn't right. It was too early, too abrupt. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone, instinctively dialing Gabriel, a desperate plea for the man she needed most. But the call failed, the line dead, as if he had vanished entirely from her world. The realization crashed over her like a wave, cold and suffocating. She was alone. Eleanor tried calling Clara, her closest friend, but Clara was away, visiting family in the suburbs. Her father, Henry Brooks, was hours away, too far to reach her in time. Another pain doubled her over, her knees buckling as she sank to the floor. Fear for her child, for herself, engulfed her, a primal terror drowning out everything else. With trembling hands, she called an ambulance, her voice choked as she gave her address. The wait was agonizing, each second stretching into eternity as the storm raged outside, lightning flashes illuminating the nursery. She clutched her phone, her belly, her heart pounding with a desperate prayer that help would arrive, that her child would be safe. Gabriel's absence was a wound deeper than the physical pain, a betrayal etched into her soul. In Scarlett's penthouse, Gabriel laughed with her, the wine easing his inhibitions, but a part of him remained unsettled. Blocking Eleanor's number had felt like a declaration, a step toward the life Scarlett promised, but it also left a gnawing ache. He pushed it down, burying it beneath the clink of glasses and Scarlett's teasing smile, convincing himself that Eleanor's calls were just another demand, another burden he wasn't ready to carry. He didn't know that across the city, his wife was fighting for their child's life, her cries unanswered, her faith in him crumbling with each unanswered ring. Eleanor's heart raced as the ambulance's lights finally pierced the rain-soaked night. Paramedics rushed her through the storm, their voices calm but urgent, a lifeline in her rising tide of fear. She lay on the stretcher, hands clasped over her belly, whispering silent promises to her child. Survive. Be strong. Know you are loved. Gabriel's absence was a shadow trailing her, a question she couldn't answer. Why had he turned away? The pain, both physical and emotional, was a tide pulling her under. But she clung to the hope that her child would endure, even if she had to face this alone. Their story, like the storm tearing through Santa Monica, was at a breaking point. Eleanor's desperate fight and Gabriel's reckless choice had snapped the fragile thread connecting them, leaving them adrift in separate worlds. The baby, a symbol of their shared dreams, was now a battleground, a life caught in the wreckage of their choices. As the ambulance sped toward Cedars-Sinai, the city's lights blurred into streaks of color, a fleeting reminder that even in the darkest moments, a spark of hope could still fight to survive. The rain-soaked night pressed against the windows of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, its sterile corridors a stark contrast to the chaos raging within Eleanor Thornton's heart. The ambulance had carried her through the storm, each jolt of the vehicle mirroring the searing, relentless pain that had overtaken her body. Dr. Hannah Coleman, her obstetrician, was a constant presence, her team moving with urgent precision as they wheeled Eleanor into the emergency operating room. Eleanor's blood pressure had spiked to alarming levels, a dangerous placental complication threatening both her life and that of her fragile unborn child. The bright cold lights of the operating room bore down on her, amplifying her vulnerability as she lay on the table, her hands trembling against the sterile sheets. Amid the pain and a haze of fear, a single hope anchored her. Gabriel would come. He would burst through the door, his face etched with worry, his arms ready to hold her, his voice whispering apologies that could mend her heart. But the door remained still, and the only sounds were the hum of machines and the clipped voices of the medical team, reminding her that she faced this ordeal alone. Eleanor's mind spiraled, caught between physical agony and a deeper smoldering pain born of Gabriel's absence. She thought of the unanswered calls, the blocked number, the way his presence had seemed to evaporate from her life just when she needed him most. Each thought was a wound, a betrayal that cut deeper than the surgeon's scalpel. The nurses tried to reach him, their efforts meeting the same dead end she had faced. But Eleanor clung to a fading image of the man she had married, the one who had stayed up with her, planned their future, promised a life built on love. As the anesthesia pulled her under, her final conscious thought was a plea for her child to survive, a vow to be strong enough for both of them if Gabriel was truly gone. Hours later, Eleanor awoke in a recovery room bathed in pale fluorescent light. Her body felt like a hollow shell, exhausted, each movement a reminder of the ordeal she had endured. Dr. Coleman's gentle voice cut through the fog, delivering a bittersweet truth. She had given birth to a daughter, Isabella Rose, a tiny, fragile being now lying in the neonatal intensive care unit, her underdeveloped lungs struggling within the embrace of an incubator. The news of her daughter was a spark of joy, a miracle that should have flooded Eleanor with light. But without Gabriel by her side, it was a solitary victory, tinged with a grief that sank deep into her bones. She lay there, her fingers tracing the edge of the hospital blanket, her heart heavy with the absence of the man who should have been holding her hand, celebrating the birth of their child. The world seemed to turn its back, leaving her to face this new reality in solitude, her love for Isabella Rose intertwined with a profound sense of loss for the life she had envisioned. Across the city, dawn broke over Scarlet Vega's opulent penthouse, its warm light doing nothing to dispel the chill in Gabriel Thornton's soul. He stirred on the couch, the remnants of the previous night souring his thoughts. His phone, discarded on the glass coffee table, buzzed with missed messages from Clara Evans and Henry Brooks, Eleanor's desperate pleas piercing the haze like a siren. "Eleanor's in surgery. Where are you?" The words hit him like a physical blow, his heart constricting as the gravity of his actions sank in. He had blocked her number, a reckless act spurred by Scarlett's mocking encouragement, a choice now burning like acid in his chest. The memory of Scarlett's laughter, the glass she raised to toast his freedom, now felt like a cruel taunt, a mirror reflecting the man he had become, a man who had abandoned his wife in her darkest hour. Gabriel's hands shook as he dressed, his mind a tempest of regret and fear. He raced to Cedars-Sinai, the city blurring through a fog of guilt. The hospital's sterile corridors closed around him, each step echoing the weight of his failure. He found Clara and Henry in the waiting room, their faces a mix of anger and disbelief. Henry's eyes, usually warm, now blazed with fury, his low growl accusing Gabriel of deserting Eleanor when she needed him most. Clara's silence was even worse, her gaze slicing through him like a blade, stripping away any defenses he might have mustered. Gabriel felt their anger like a physical force, but it was nothing compared to the dread coiling in his gut as he approached Eleanor's room. Eleanor lay in the hospital bed, her face pale and drawn, her eyes sunken with exhaustion and hurt. When she saw Gabriel, a flicker of hope crossed her face, swiftly extinguished by the memory of his absence. Her voice, barely a whisper, carried a question that cut deeper than any accusation. Why had he cut her off? Gabriel stood frozen, the truth about Scarlett, a shadow he had hidden, looming like a specter ready to consume him. He wanted to explain, to beg for forgiveness. But the words choked in his throat, stifled by the enormity of his betrayal. Eleanor's gaze searched his, seeking the man she loved, but found only a stranger whose choices had shattered her trust. The silence between them was a chasm, filled with the unspoken pain of a marriage teetering on the brink. Gabriel's heart was a battlefield, torn between the life he had chased with Scarlett and the reality of what he had lost. The image of Eleanor, alone in her pain, and the thought of their daughter, fighting for life in an incubator, were daggers of remorse. He had sought freedom, but found only chains of his own making, each link forged by his decisions. Eleanor, meanwhile, clung to Isabella's existence as her sole source of strength, her love for her daughter, a lifeline amid the wreckage of their marriage. The pain of Gabriel's absence was a wound that would not easily heal, a scar that would mark her even as she fought to move forward. Their story, like the rain that had finally ceased outside the hospital, stood at a crossroads. Eleanor's resilience and Gabriel's awakening guilt were colliding forces, each shaping the path ahead. Isabella Rose, a fragile beacon of hope, lay at the heart of their fractured bond, a reminder that even in the darkest nights, a new dawn might rise, if they could find the courage to face the truth. The days after Eleanor Thornton's hospital ordeal were cloaked in fragile stillness, the world pausing before her delicate new reality. Leaving Cedars-Sinai, her heart was broken but intact, her newborn Isabella Rose fighting for life in the neonatal unit. Unable to face their Santa Monica apartment, heavy with Gabriel's absence, Eleanor found refuge with Clara Evans in her cozy Pasadena home. There she poured her love into Isabella, tracing the incubator's glass, whispering promises of strength and a future free from betrayal. Gabriel's name was a shadow she avoided, his absence a raw wound. She refused his visits, her silence shielding her hope for her child. Gabriel, meanwhile, was consumed by regret. Eleanor's anguished face haunted him, a reminder of the man who abandoned his wife in her darkest hour. Guilt weighed on him. Scarlett Vega's once alluring laughter now a hollow mockery of the freedom he chased at great cost. No longer the real estate king, he saw his empire as crumbling sand. Seeking redemption, he turned to Ethan Marshall, a friend whose blunt wisdom was a steady anchor. In a Pasadena coffee shop, its worn tables bearing witness, Gabriel confessed his sins. The affair with Scarlett, blocking Eleanor's calls, and drowning in denial while his wife fought for their child. Ethan's unflinching gaze mirrored Gabriel's failures, his blunt advice urging action to save his family and confront Scarlett. Ethan's lifeline pulled Gabriel toward a steep path of redemption. Ethan's legal skills revealed Scarlett's deceit, siphoning funds into offshore accounts. At a discreet Hollywood hotel, Ethan presented damning evidence to Scarlett, her confident mask crumbling. Her manipulative empire collapsed, and she agreed to leave Los Angeles to avoid scandal. As her heels clicked away, Gabriel felt quiet relief, a first step toward reclaiming his life. Freed from Scarlett, Gabriel sought Eleanor, standing at Clara's door like a penitent. Eleanor's scarred eyes met his, softened by lamplight. With raw honesty, he admitted his failures and his desperate wish to be the husband and father Isabella deserved. His trembling voice carried sincerity born of loss. Eleanor's heart battled anger and love, her trust shattered but not lost. For Isabella's sake, she agreed to couples therapy, her voice cautious, a fragile bridge over their chasm. Eleanor's choice stemmed from fierce love for her child, not surrender. She saw a glimmer of the man she once trusted, but therapy loomed as a daunting journey into their pain, taken for Isabella's chance at a father's love. Her heart remained guarded, yet a small window of hope opened. Gabriel felt Eleanor's cautious agreement as both gift and challenge. The path ahead demanded accountability. Thinking of Isabella and Eleanor's humbling strength, his guilt-fueled resolve to build anew with honesty. Their story, like Pasadena's gentle sunlight, hinted at a challenging dawn. Eleanor's guarded hope and Gabriel's remorse wove a new tapestry, with Isabella still fighting at its heart. A reminder that love and courage could foster healing from deep wounds. The autumn breeze swept through Los Angeles, its crisp scent softening the city's edges. For Eleanor, Grayson, and Thomas, the fading golden light signaled a cautious rebirth, a chance to salvage what nearly slipped away. Their therapy was no victory march, but a slow unraveling of pain, each session stripping away layers of betrayal to reveal raw vulnerability. The therapist's office, with its muted tones and oversized chairs, became a crucible for confronting Eleanor's quiet rage, Thomas's deep remorse, and the fragile hope binding them. Grueling yet vital, it testified to their resolve to forge a path for their daughter, Isabella Rose, whose tiny presence guided them through the darkness. Thomas, once a charismatic real estate mogul, abandoned the allure of glitzy galas and power plays. He found purpose in quiet vigils beside Isabella's incubator, watching her fragile breaths in the hospital's hum, whispering tales of his San Diego youth, salty air, barefoot summers, dreams of lasting legacies. He connected with the daughter he nearly lost, vowing to be the father she deserved. Each word was a step toward atonement, his heart now beating for Isabella's fierce life and Eleanor's strength, which he was only beginning to truly see. Eleanor, long overshadowed by Thomas's ambition, rediscovered her light. Years of sidelining her dreams had left her hollow, but now she embraced her passion for art, curating exhibitions in Santa Barbara's galleries. Each project was a reclamation, her resilience mirrored in vibrant artworks, defying the pain that once defined her. Her love for Isabella anchored her, but her trust in Thomas flickered like a candle in the wind, fragile yet persistent. One afternoon at Lake Balboa, the family walked together, Isabella's stroller crunching on gravel. The silence was contemplative, filled with rustling leaves and Isabella's bright laughter. Now stronger, her cheeks flushed, she reached out with curious hands. Thomas, heart full, spoke earnestly of finding happiness not in skyscrapers or headlines, but in these moments. Isabella's giggle, Eleanor's steady gaze, their shared presence. Eleanor's small smile hinted at possibility, a knot loosening within her, a whisper of hope for something real. A year later, in Clara's Pasadena garden, they gathered for a simple ceremony. No opulence, just loved ones under late afternoon light, wildflowers, and a weathered bench. Isabella, a toddling bundle of energy, scampered with petals, her laughter weaving through the air. Eleanor and Thomas, hands entwined, renewed vows with the clarity of survivors. Eleanor's steady voice acknowledged their scarred past but envisioned a future built on pieced-together trust. Thomas's glistening eyes vowed to honor this second chance. Their love, imperfect but resilient, was forged in loss and redemption. In quiet moments, Thomas reading to Isabella, Eleanor sketching, shared coffee glances, they found strength. Betrayal's wounds lingered, but courage, forgiveness, and stubborn resolve wove a new tapestry. As the sun set, casting a warm glow, their story rooted in authenticity, a tale of two who fell and rose together, Isabella their saving grace. A reminder that even in storms, a fragile light can persist if sought with daring. For those who hear this story, let it touch your heart. Share it if it resonates, and reflect. What challenges have you faced to reclaim trust in your own life? Their journey reminds us that even in the fiercest storms, a new light can emerge, fragile yet persistent, if we dare to seek it.